Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commanders of this deck are Ich-Tekik, Salvage Splicer, and Silas Renn, Seeker Adept. Ich-Tekik is 4 and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature, Human Artificer. When it enters the battlefield, create a 3/3 colourless Golem artifact creature token. It also has, whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Ich-Tekik and a +1/+1 counter on each Golem you control. Silas Renn is 1 blue-black for a 2/2 legendary creature, Human with Death Touch. When Silas Renn deals combat damage to a player, choose target artifact card in your graveyard, you may cast this card this turn, and they both have partner. The aim of this deck is to flood the board with Golems and artifacts. We'll then sack the artifacts to make our Golems a lethal threat. While we do want a portion of this deck to be Golems, we won't just run them for the sake of making numbers. We'll flag where they fit into relevant categories, and then go through the best Golems towards the end. In addition, when it comes to the artifacts to sack, this deck will also make a lot of use out of treasure, so look out for those cards. The first section of this deck will be the card draw. We want to run at least 8 bits here, but you could easily run up to 12. The reason for this is that these 8 cards here all synergize with our other artifacts. So that also means we can run some less synergistic, but more consistent bits of card draw, such as these cards. Although these are not artifacts, card draw is one area I would be okay adding cards that don't fully fit into the game plan, as we need to make sure we have enough things to do. Ramp, however, is not somewhere we need to stray away from artifacts. The first part would be some cards to get lands out of the deck. I would consider these 3, as even in the late game, they have a use when they are sacrificed and buff up our board. The next section of ramp will be spells that make our artifacts cheaper. As most of the deck will be artifacts, they can count towards our ramp. We can also run some cards that make artifacts that let us ramp. This can be something like Gilded Goose, which can make food, which we can then sack later for mana, or it can be cards that make treasure throughout the game. And finally, we also want to run a standard package of mana rocks, so we can start ramping out early in the game. Outside of the standard Soul Ring and Signets, I would look to run rocks that can sack themselves for value. You can easily run up to 16 bits of ramp in the deck, as everything we've listed fits nicely into our game plan. At a minimum, however, you definitely want to run these 8 cards here. On top of everything we've listed, you can also run Blinkmoth Urn, which with any kind of a board state should give us a ton of additional mana. Unsurprisingly, a large portion of removal will also be on artifacts, or our spells that care about artifacts, such as Phyrexian Scriptures. Of our 8 bits of interaction, I would want at least half to be on effects like these. The other half, however, I would go for the best bits of instant speed interaction that you have available to you. Some things just need to be at instant speed. The other card that's worth mentioning here is Spell Swindle, which is great in the deck as it can make us a ton of treasure. I would get a little greedy with this card and save it for a spell that's at least 5 CMC or more, unless there is something like a board wipe that ruins our plans, in which case feel free to fire it off. We also want to run some spells that let us sacrifice artifacts that can't sack themselves. I've mainly looked for cards that have interesting additional effects, such as Throne of Guest's Proliferate ability. The wider variety of effects you have, the more interesting and more powerful the deck will be. The best option on the list, however, is Krark Clan Ironworks, but unfortunately it looks to be the most expensive. Hopefully at some point it'll see a reprint in a Commander product or something that doesn't go through standard at some point, so if the price point is too high for you, then maybe wait till it comes down. To go along with these sack outlets, we also want some additional token makers. The ones that make Golems specifically will be very good in the deck, as these will be what we are buffing up to swing through and kill our opponents. The Splicers are effectively Golem Lords. They'll never be getting into combat themselves, but the effect they give to our team will be invaluable. Wing Splicer especially, giving our buff team flying, will be an all-star in this deck. Sai and Thopter Spy Network will also do a great job at giving us some flying threats, that we can also sack for additional value. Thopter Spy Network could easily be in the card draw section, but the overlap is always nice and is a sign of a good synergistic deck. Then of course there are the bestest of Golems. We do need to make sure that we have a critical mass of these, so that the deck functions. However, I wouldn't want to run any cards that are just Golems without any cool abilities or synergies. This is where I would look to fill any spots in the curve. I'd also want to run a couple of bits of artifact recursion, just so we have some good redundancy in case anything gets removed. Scrap Trawler especially will do some really good things with all the artifacts that we will be sacking, as it will give us additional gas turn after turn. One of the things I really like about this deck is that it's brimming with win conditions. We should already be in a good state from Ich-Tekik combined with the Golems and sack outlets that we're running, but there are a ton of additional ways that we can win the game. First up is cards like Antiquities War and Tezzeret the Seeker. Turning our board into base 5/5s should do a great job of this. It will turn our treasure into beaters, and will buff a large portion of our Golems as well. Any +1/+1 counters on them will still add up on top of this. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge, and Tezzeret, Agent of Bolus are also great win cons in this deck. What we're specifically looking at is the ability to deal damage equal to the number of artifacts that we control, so these will do a ton of damage in this deck. And since it was printed, I've been looking for a deck for Marionette Master to shine in, and this looks to be its home. It makes tokens, but more importantly, it pings players to the face. If you fabricate onto Marionette Master, each time you sack a treasure, an opponent will be pinged for 4 damage. As one of the primary aims of this deck is putting +1/+1 counters onto our creatures, Herald of Secret Streams can very easily make our whole team unblockable, which should end things nice and quickly. I would also be very tempted to run Cranial Plating in this deck. The ability to move it at instant speed means that it's miserable for our opponents to block, and if a commander of ours is ever unblocked, that could be a fatal mistake for that opponent. Moving on to alternative win cons, Mirrodin Besieged should have no problem winning us a long drawn out game, or we can cast Mechanized Production on a treasure or a Golem token to win us the game. Or we can cast Mechanized Production on a Blightsteel Colossus, which if that card needed to be better at winning games, is also a Golem, that'll be buffed by Ich-Tekik and given flying by Wing Splicer. Because a large portion of our deck is colourless spells, we can run more colourless utility lands than a normal 3-colour deck, but in total I wouldn't go above 8 colourless lands. And I would also want to run the artifact lands just to help buff our artifact count up even higher. Our final point on this deck, you want to make sure at least 3/4 of the non-land permanents you're running are artifacts or make artifacts. These type of decks often fall over by running too many cards that do cool things with artifacts, but don't add to the actual artifact count of the deck. Just something to keep in mind. The next couple of deck techs on the channel will be focusing on the new commanders from Kaldheim, but after that we'll go back to viewers' requests. So if there's anything you want to see, please let us know down in the comments below, and subscribe so you see those videos when they come out. Thank you very much for watching.